Good morning. Thank you for joining me today. This morning we'll be in Joshua chapter 5, verse 1 through chapter 7, verse 15. When all the Amorite kings on the west side of the Jordan and all the Canaanite kings along the seacoast heard how the Lord had dried up the water of the Jordan before the Israelites while they crossed, they lost their courage and could not even breathe for fear of the Israelites. At that time the Lord told Joshua, "Make flint knives and circumcise the Israelites once again." So Joshua made flint knives and circumcised the Israelites on the hill of the foreskins. This is why Joshua had to circumcise them. All the men old enough to fight when they left Egypt died on the journey through the desert after they left Egypt. Not all the men who left were circumcised, but all the sons born on the journey through the desert after they left Egypt were uncircumcised. Indeed, for 40 years the Israelites traveled through the desert, until all the men old enough to fight when they left Egypt, the ones who had disobeyed the Lord, died off, for the Lord had sworn a solemn oath to them that he would not let them see the land he had sworn on oath to give them, a land rich in milk and honey. He replaced them with their sons, whom Joshua circumcised. They were uncircumcised. Their fathers had not circumcised them along the way. When all the men had been circumcised, they stayed there in the camp until they had healed. The Lord said to Joshua, "Today I have taken away the disgrace of Egypt from you." So that place is called Gilgal, even to this day. So the Israelites camped in Gilgal and celebrated the Passover in the evening of the 14th day of the month on the plains of Jericho. They ate some of the produce of the land the day after the Passover, including unleavened bread and roasted grain. The manna stopped appearing the day they ate some of the produce of the land. The Israelites never ate manna again. When Joshua was near Jericho, he looked up and saw a man standing in front of him, holding a drawn sword. Joshua approached him and asked him, "Are you on our side, or allied with our enemies?" He answered, "Truly I am the commander of the Lord's army. Now I have arrived." Joshua bowed down with his face to the ground and asked, "What does my master want to say to his servant?" The commander of the Lord's army answered Joshua, "Remove your sandals from your feet, because the place where you stand is holy." Now Jericho was shut tightly because of the Israelites. No one was allowed to leave or enter. The Lord told Joshua, "See, I am about to defeat Jericho for you, along with its king and its warriors. Have all the warriors march around the city one time. Do this for 6 days. Have 7 priests carry 7 ram's horns in front of the ark. On the 7th day, march around the city 7 times, while the priests blow the horns. When you hear the signal from the ram's horn, have the whole army give a loud battle cry. Then the city wall will collapse, and the warriors should charge straight ahead." So Joshua son of Nun summoned the priests and instructed them, "Pick up the ark of the covenant, and 7 priests must carry 7 ram's horns in front of the ark of the Lord." And he told the army, "Move ahead and march around the city, with armed troops going ahead of the ark of the Lord." When Joshua gave the army its orders, the 7 priests carrying the 7 ram's horns before the Lord moved ahead, and blew the horns as the ark of the covenant of the Lord followed behind. Armed troops marched ahead of the priests, blowing the horns, while the rear guard followed along behind the ark, blowing ram's horns. Now Joshua had instructed the army, "Do not give a battle cry, or raise your voices. Say nothing until the day I tell you, give the battle cry. Then give the battle cry." So Joshua made sure they marched the ark of the Lord around the city one time. Then they went back to the camp and spent the night there. Bright and early the next morning, Joshua had the priests pick up the ark of the Lord. The 7 priests, carrying the 7 ram's horns, before the ark of the Lord marched along, blowing their horns. Armed troops marched ahead of them, while the rear guard followed along behind the ark of the Lord, blowing ram's horns. They marched around the city one time on the 2nd day, then returned to the camp. They did this 6 days in all. On the 7th day, they were up at the crack of dawn and marched around the city as before. Only this time they marched around it 7 times. The 7th time around, the priests blew the ram's horns, and Joshua told the army, "Give the battle cry, for the Lord is handing the city over to you. The city and all that is in it must be set apart for the Lord, except for Rahab the prostitute and all who are with her in her house, because she hid the spies we sent. But be careful when you are setting apart the riches for the Lord. If you take any of it, you will make the Israelite camp subject to annihilation and cause a disaster. All the silver and gold, as well as bronze and iron items, belong to the Lord. They must go into the Lord's treasury. The ram's horns sounded, and when the army heard the signal, they gave a loud battle cry. The wall collapsed, and the warriors charged straight ahead into the city and captured it. They annihilated it with the sword, everything that breathed in the city, including men and women, young and old, as well as cattle, sheep, and donkeys. Joshua told the 2 men who had spied on the land to enter the prostitute's house and bring out the woman and all who belonged to her, as you promised her. So the young spies went and brought out Rahab, her father, mother, and brothers, and all who belonged to her. They brought out her whole family and took them to a place outside the Israelite camp. But they burned the city and all that was in it, except for the silver, gold, and bronze, and iron items they put in the treasury of the Lord's house. Yet Joshua spared Rahab the prostitute, her father's family, and all who belonged to her. She lived in Israel to this very day because she hid the messengers Joshua sent to spy on Jericho. At that time Joshua made this solemn declaration: the man who attempts to rebuild this city of Jericho will stand condemned before the Lord. He will lose his firstborn son when he lays its foundations, and his youngest son when he erects its gates. The Lord was with Joshua, and he became famous throughout the land. But the Israelites disobeyed the command about the city's riches. Achan, son of Carmi, son of Zabdi, son of Zerah, from the tribe of Judah, stole some of the riches. The Lord was furious with the Israelites. Joshua sent men from Jericho to Ai, which is located near Beth-aven, east of Bethel, and instructed them, "Go up and spy on the land." So the men went up and spied on Ai. They returned and reported to Joshua, "Don't send the whole army. About 2,000 or 3,000 men are adequate to defeat Ai. Don't tire out the whole army, for Ai is small." So about 3,000 men went up, but they fled from the men of Ai. The men of Ai killed about 36 of them, and chased them from in front of the city gate all the way to the fishers, and defeated them on the steep slope. The people's courage melted away like water. Joshua tore his clothes. He and the leaders of Israel lay face down on the ground before the ark of the Lord until evening, and threw dirt on their heads. Joshua prayed, "O Master, Lord, why did you bring these people across the Jordan to hand us over to the Amorites, so they could destroy us? If only we had been satisfied to live on the other side of the Jordan, O Lord. What can I say now that Israel has retreated before its enemies? When the Canaanites and all who live in the land hear about this, they will turn against us and destroy the very memory of us from the earth. What will you do to protect your great reputation?" The Lord responded to Joshua, "Get up. Why are you lying there face down? Israel has sinned. They have violated my covenantal commandment. They have taken some of the riches, they have stolen them, and deceitfully put them among their own possessions. The Israelites are unable to stand before their enemies. They retreat because they have become subject to annihilation. I will no longer be with you unless you destroy what has contaminated you. Get up, ritually consecrate the people, and tell them this: ritually consecrate yourselves for tomorrow, because the Lord God of Israel says, "You are contaminated, O Israel. You will not be able to stand before your enemies until you remove what is contaminating you. In the morning you must approach in tribal order. The tribe the Lord selects must approach by clans. The clan the Lord selects must approach by families. The family the Lord selects must approach man by man. The one caught with the riches must be burned up along with all who belong to him, because he violated the Lord's covenant and did such a disgraceful thing in Israel." So that was a good long section there. So apparently all the Israelites who were young or born in the wilderness were uncircumcised, which is kind of interesting to me, because it's not as though God gave the ritual of circumcision to the people coming out of Egypt as part of like the law in Leviticus, though there are portions surrounding that. But it was further back during the time of Abraham when the sign of circumcision was given, that that all of Abraham's descendants would be set apart to the Lord. So it's interesting that they would abandon even this particular ritual while in the wilderness. while under God's provision. That is, with God providing food from heaven and water from rocks for him. So it's interesting that we can spite God to that extent. You also have the commander of the army of Yahweh here approaching Joshua and telling him this plan to take over Jericho. That is, if they walk around Jericho a number of times, then the wall will fall down and they can take over the city easily. So, pretty miraculous there. And then you have Achan, son of Carmi, taking some of the spoils of Jericho and hiding it, and Israel's subsequent defeat by the city of Ai, a small city. So, yeah. Anyhow, carrying on. Luke chapter 15, verses 1 through 32. Now, all the tax collectors and sinners were coming to hear him, but the Pharisees and the experts in the law were complaining, "This man welcomes sinners and eats with them." So Jesus told them this parable. "Which one of you, if he has 100 sheep and loses one of them, would not leave the 99 in the open pasture and go look for the one that is lost until he finds it? Then, when he has found it, he places it on his shoulders, rejoicing. Returning home, he calls together his friends and neighbors, telling them, 'Rejoice with me, because I have found my sheep that was lost.' I tell you, in the same way, there will be more joy in heaven over one sinner who repents than over 99 righteous people who have no need to repent. Or what woman, if she has 10 silver coins and loses one of them, does not light a lamp, sweep the house, and search thoroughly until she finds it? Then, when she has found it, she calls together her friends and neighbors, saying, 'Rejoice with me, for I have found the coin that I had lost.' In the same way, I tell you, there is joy in the presence of God's angels over one sinner who repents." Then Jesus said, "A man had 2 sons. The younger of them said to his father, 'Father, give me the share of the estate that will belong to me.' So he divided his assets between them. After a few days, the younger son gathered together all he had and left on a journey to a distant country, and there he squandered his wealth with a wild lifestyle. Then, after he had spent everything, a severe famine took place in that country, and he began to be in need. So he went and worked for one of the citizens of that country, who sent him to his fields to feed pigs. He was longing to eat the carob pods the pigs were eating, but no one gave him anything. But when he came to his senses, he said, 'How many of my father's hired workers have food enough to spare, but here I am dying of hunger. I will get up and go to my father and say to him, Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son. Treat me like one of your hired workers.' So he got up and went to his father. But while he was still a long way from his father, from home, his father saw him, and his heart went out to him. He ran and hugged his son and kissed him. Then his son said to him, 'Father, I have sinned against heaven and against you. I am no longer worthy to be called your son.' But the father said to his slaves, 'Hurry, bring the best robe and put it on him. Put a ring on his finger and sandals on his feet. Bring the fattened calf and kill it. Let us eat and celebrate. Because this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found.' So they began to celebrate. Now his older son was in the field. As he came and approached the house, he heard music and dancing. So he called one of the slaves and asked what was happening. The slave replied, 'Your brother has returned, and your father has killed the fattened calf, because he got his son back safe and sound.' But the older son became angry and refused to go in. His father came out and appealed to him. But he answered his father, 'Look, these many years I have worked like a slave for you, and I never disobeyed your commands. Yet you never gave me even a goat so that I could celebrate with my friends. But when this son of yours came back, who has devoured your assets with prostitutes, you killed the fattened calf for him.' Then the father said to him, 'Son, you are always with me, and everything that belongs to me is yours. It was appropriate to celebrate and be glad, for your brother was dead and is alive. He was lost and is found. Some pretty beautiful that in Luke 15:10, I tell you there is joy in the presence of God's angels over one sinner who repents. And I think it truly is a beautiful thing when somebody realizes that they were wrong and works to correct that. That is, realizes the depth of their sin and their need for a Savior. So, yeah. Carrying on, Psalm chapter 81, verses 1 through 16. Shout for joy to God, our source of strength. Shout out to the God of Jacob. Sing a song and play the tambourine, the pleasant-sounding harp and the ten-stringed instrument. Sound the ram's horn on the day of the new moon, and on the day of the full moon when our festival begins. For observing the festival is a requirement for Israel. It is an ordinance given by the God of Jacob. He decreed it as a regulation in Joseph when he attacked the land of Egypt. I heard a voice I did not recognize. It said, I removed the burden from his shoulder. His hands were released from holding the basket. In your distress you called out, and I rescued you. I answered you from a dark thundercloud. I tested you at the waters of Meribah. Selah. I said, Listen, my people, I will warn you. O Israel, if only you would obey me. There must be no other God among you. You must not worship a foreign god. I am the Lord your God, the one who brought you out of the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide, and I will fill it. But my people did not obey me. Israel did not submit to me. I gave them over to their stubborn desires. They did what seemed right to them. If only my people would obey me. If only Israel would keep my commands. Then I would quickly subdue their enemies and attack their adversaries. May those who hate the Lord cower in fear before him. May they be permanently humiliated. I would feed Israel the best wheat and would satisfy your appetite with honey from the rocky cliffs. Psalm 81:12. I gave them over to their stubborn desires. They did what seemed right to them. It's a sorry position to be in, but I hear many people, talk about the God of the Old Testament as if he is some sort of vindictive, crotchety old man that is looking for every opportunity to blast at the sins of anyone and everyone. But really, it's the result of our sin that we fall into the terrible situations that we do. That is, there's only good with God, and apart from God, there's only suffering. So, anything good we enjoy here on earth ultimately comes from God. To me, this is similar to that bit in Romans where people are given over to irregular lusts, like man for man and woman for woman. And have the consequence of that in their body. Finally, Proverbs 13:1. A wise son accepts his father's discipline, but a scoffer does not listen to rebuke. Yeah. And if you scorn discipline for long enough, then you end up in a bad spot. Well, that's all. Thank you for joining me today. Hope you have a great day.